As fellow concubine maids, Cui Lu and I have been rivals for half our lives. We competed for favor, for our share of provisions, and for the position of concubine. Later, Cui Lu suffered a miscarriage and could no longer bear children. I drank a bowl of soup given to me by the mistress. And when I awoke, I found myself entangled with the stable hand. We were caught in bed together. The general flew into a rage, drew his sword, and aimed it at me. But to my surprise, Cui Lu stepped in front of me and took the blow. As she lay dying, she gripped my hand for the first time in her life. "Why are you crying? You look so ugly. I told you before. The mistress is no good. I tried to protect you, but you still fell into her trap." Cui Lu and I both met our end. And the biggest winner was the lady of the house, who had always been praised for her virtue. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day Cui Lu first entered the mansion. The lady looked at me with a troubled expression and said, "Cui Lu said she likes your room. Why don't you let her have it?" I smiled and nodded. "All right. I'll go help Cui Lu's sister pack her things." Welcome to my channel. If you like this story, please click to subscribe. There are more wonderful stories waiting for you to listen to. Chapter 1. A dizzy spell overcame me, and before my eyes appeared the kind and gentle face of General Ling Ziyuan's wife, Lin Xia. She gently patted my hand with a look of restraint and difficulty. "Hua Mei, Cui Lu said she has her eye on your room. She was given to you by the general's superior as a concubine, so even I must give her some face. Please let her have it." I instinctively pulled my hand away from hers, feeling a moment of disorientation. I had been reborn. On this very day in my previous life, General Ling Ziyuan's superior had given him a beautiful concubine named Cui Lu. Ling Ziyuan had refused but eventually brought her back for Lin Xia to arrange for her. Lin Xia looked distressed as she urged me to give up the room. I couldn't contain my anger and ran off to have a huge argument with Cui Lu. I was furious at her arrogance and audacity, daring to challenge me so soon after arriving at the mansion. She wasn't one to back down either, crossing her arms and shouting back at me. We caused such a commotion that Ling Ziyuan was alerted. He punished us by making us kneel on tiles under the blazing sun and harshly scolded us as shoeless harpies unworthy of the stage. He then embraced Lin Xia, who appeared even more graceful and virtuous in contrast to us, and entered the room. From that day on, Cui Lu and I became sworn enemies, always at odds with each other. Lin Xia, mindful of our status, couldn't intervene deeply and only tried to mediate between us. Yes. Status. Even concubine maids were divided into different ranks. I was originally a maid in the courtyard of Yishe, the old lady of the general's mansion and the biological mother of Ling Ziyuan. Yishe personally selected me and bestowed me upon Ling Ziyuan as his concubine. What the elders gave was like cats and dogs in the old lady's courtyard. Even the younger generation couldn't easily scold or beat them, let alone a living person. Cui Lu, on the other hand, was a gift from Ling Ziyuan's direct superior, Lord Zhao, so she couldn't be easily beaten or killed at will. Otherwise, if someone with ulterior motives spread rumors, it would cause a rift. Ling Ziyuan and Lin Xia were deeply in love. After 2 years of marriage, there were only the two of us concubines in the courtyard, and each of us had some background. Lin Xia pulled my hand in private, sighing with regret. "Hua Mei, I treat you like a sister. The general understands my weak constitution and wants me to live in peace and quiet. He promised that there would only be one concubine in the inner courtyard. I had planned to elevate you to concubine after the new year, but then Cui Lu arrived. The position of concubine has truly put me in a difficult position. For a concubine like me, the best outcome is to be elevated to concubine, become a half-mistress, have a son or daughter, and live out my days in peace. I had even been grateful for my good fortune. having encountered a kind and virtuous mistress. But I never expected such a sudden turn of events. From that day onward, I began to compete with Chui Lu. When Ling Ziyuan went to her room, I would intercept him. If she set her sights on a piece of fabric, I would try to take it from her. Cold insults and sharp-toned arguments became a daily occurrence. Later, Chui Lu became pregnant. Out of resentment toward Lin Xia's favoritism toward her, I had a fierce argument with her. That night, Chui Lu miscarried and could no longer bear children. The doctor said it was due to the emotional distress. In a fit of rage, Ling Ziyuan stomped on my knee, shattering it. On my deathbed in my previous life, I finally realized that Chui Lu was skilled in verbal combat and never backed down in an argument. Moreover, she was in good health, and her pregnancy was stable. How could a single argument cause her to miscarry? This must have been Lin Xia's doing. She couldn't openly target me and Chui Lu, so she schemed to pit us against each other. She framed Chui Lu's miscarriage on me, causing me to lose favor completely. Since Chui Lu couldn't have children, she posed no threat to her anymore. She then plotted to frame me for adultery and take my life. By eliminating two troublesome thorns in her side, she preserved her reputation as a virtuous and kind woman. She ended up with the reputation of a loving couple and an empty harem. Unfortunately, I didn't see Lin Xia's true colors until I died in my previous life. And I lost Chui Lu's life for nothing. Thinking of this, I bowed lightly to Lin Xia with a smile and nodded. Finally, a sister to keep me company. My room has too many mosquitoes. I should go find some mugwort to burn and make it comfortable for Chui Lu to move in. Lin Xia frowned in surprise. I forced myself to suppress my excitement and hurried toward the room. From afar, I saw the slender figure standing at the door, examining the house, and tears blurred my vision. At that moment, Chui Lu was still vibrant and healthy, completely different from her pale and weak appearance after the miscarriage in my previous life. She furrowed her beautiful brows, placed her hands on her hips, and muttered incessantly, "This room is clearly occupied. Why make me stay here? Does the general's mansion want me to sleep on the floor?" In my previous life, I had argued with Chui Lu without a care, never realizing that from the start, both of us had fallen into Lin Xia's trap. Chui Lu's sister. This is my room. Chui Lu noticed me standing behind her, straightened her chest, and raised her eyebrows. "Oh, what's the matter? Are you trying to kick me out?" As she spoke, she boldly rolled up her sleeves. Seeing her lively and decisive demeanor, I could no longer suppress my excitement and took big steps toward her. Chui Lu took a step back, adopting a defensive stance. I stepped forward and embraced her tightly. I buried my face in the crook of her neck. Chui Lu's body froze instantly. What are you doing? What are the rules in the general's mansion? Let me tell you, I'm not the kind of woman who enjoys being with men. Images from my previous life flashed through my mind, Chui Lu dragging her weakened body to shield me from a sword, her body covered in blood. You foolish woman. If it weren't for you arguing with me every day, how would the general's mansion have survived? I saw through her long ago and warned you. But you fool, believed her. This life, I return to you. She took her last breath in my arms, her eyes wide open in death. Though I didn't understand the meaning of her final words or why she risked her life to save me. In this life, I vowed to protect her at all costs. I nodded and hugged her tighter. I just felt an instant connection with my sister. I'll tidy up this room right away for her to stay in. After speaking, I blinked my tear-filled eyes, leaving Chui Lu with her mouth slightly open, staring at me in a daze. I spread the brand new cotton quilt on the bed, smoothing out the wrinkles as if smoothing out the path of my life. Lin Xia, Ling Ziyuan, since heaven has given me a second chance at life, I will make you two hypocritical spouses pay the price you deserve. Just as I had settled down, Huang Laonyang, who was by Lin Xia's side, came to deliver a message. The lady is calling Cui Lu and Huame. Cui Lu ignored Huang Laonyang, merely snorted lightly, and then twisted her body and walked toward the main room. I felt a little puzzled. In my previous life, Lin Xia had not called us. It must be because I obediently gave up the room and did not quarrel with Cui Lu. So Lin Xia had another plan. Sure enough, as soon as we entered her room, Lin Xia took Cui Lu's hand affectionately and praised her endlessly. Look at how adorable you are. Not even a single strand of your hair compares to the maids in the entire general's mansion. Upon hearing this, I nodded in agreement. She was right, my sister Cui Lu truly was the most beautiful. Cui Lu remained humble and modest, repeatedly declining the praise. Lin Xia glanced at me, noticing my calm expression tinged with approval, and her face stiffened. Today is Cui Lu's special day for entering the mansion. Let's set aside the rules of master and servant. It's time for lunch, let's have a meal together. Consider it my way of welcoming you. As she spoke, she waved me over. Huame, come and serve the meal. Cui Lu frowned and refused repeatedly, but Lin Xia pulled her to the seat without explanation. Smiling warmly and kindly, looking just like a virtuous and generous mistress, Cui Lu sat down tentatively, her frown deepening. I clenched my fists tightly. Cui Lu and I were both concubine maids, the same as each other. Yet Lin Xia openly favored Cui Lu, making me serve her and humiliating me in front of everyone. If I were to act according to my previous life's temperament, I would certainly cause a scene with Cui Lu. And if Cui Lu were a shallow and arrogant person, she would surely become arrogant and forget herself. What a clever scheme to flatter and destroy her. Huame, don't just stand there. Come quickly and serve Cui Lu some soup and vegetables. I obediently rolled up my sleeves and served the bamboo shoots and the tenderest chicken breast from the bowl of fresh bamboo shoot chicken soup to Cui Lu. She was too thin, she needed to gain some weight. The moment the soup bowl was placed in front of Cui Lu, her body trembled, her breathing rapidly quickened, and her beautiful eyes stared intently at my wrist. Your hand. I blushed and pulled my sleeve to cover the red flower-shaped birthmark on my wrist. It's just a birthmark. I was born with it. Cui Lu raised her eyes and studied my face with an extremely strange expression, her eyes brimming with tears. Cui Lu, what's wrong with you? Lin Xia looked at Cui Lu suspiciously. Cui Lu snapped back to her senses and covered her mouth and nose with a handkerchief in disgust. Having such a thing is disgusting. I looked up in surprise. Lin Xia sighed in relief and smiled slightly. After Cui Lu left, Lin Xia kept me behind to talk. It was the same old story about the concubine's position from my previous life. The difference was that this time, she slipped a jade bracelet with an excellent water head from her own wrist and slipped it onto my hand. It fit perfectly, covering the birthmark. Huame, Cui Lu is indeed a sharp-tongued and competitive woman. Don't take it to heart. Look. Isn't this better? I had to give her some face for Lord Zhao's sake. But in my heart, I still love you like my own sister. I pretended to be delighted and lowered my head to rub the bracelet. Lin Xia would not give up until she saw Cui Lu and I completely fall out. I didn't know how much trouble she would cause. By avoiding her, I was putting myself in a passive position. I bit my lip in anger. The lady has the heart of a bodhisattva. But I don't. What does it matter what Lord Zhao sent? Mei Xiang is just a servant. I just can't stand her arrogant attitude. Lin Xia sighed deeply, but her eyes were shining with determination. Just as I returned to my room from Lin Xia's, I saw Cui Lu, dressed in green, leaning casually against the window of my room. Upon seeing me, she looked somewhat uneasy and pursed her lips. Hey, you're not one of the house servants, are you? How old were you when you were sold here? What was the name of the slave trader who sold you? Chui Lu had asked me this before in her previous life. But at the time, she had only started the conversation, and I had assumed she was mocking my background. So I had scolded her back. Later, I heard that she had even inquired about it privately. I blinked and answered honestly. I was sold when I was about 5 or 6 years old. I was too young at the time, and I don't remember much. I don't even remember the name of the slave trader. Chui Lu exhaled deeply upon hearing this, her expression a mix of sadness and joy. She lowered her eyes for a moment, then looked up again, her usual bold and vibrant expression returning. She eyed me disdainfully from head to toe. Look at you. Such a fool. That Lin Xia is only average looking. Yet you dress yourself up so elaborately. She glanced at the jade bracelet on my wrist. Let me tell you. Your mistress isn't a kind-hearted person. Such tactics of sowing discord and using others to achieve one's goals are commonplace in the Zhao mansion. She's a snake in sheep's clothing. Don't let a few small favors blind you. Although Chui Lu hadn't said it so clearly in her previous life, she had hinted at it before. However, I hadn't taken it to heart, thinking she was just jealous that Lin Xia favored me. I held Chui Lu's hand and looked straight into her eyes. Although I don't know why you're telling me these heartfelt words, I deeply feel that what you're saying makes sense. After speaking, I removed the bracelet from my wrist and threw it to the ground with force. The bracelet shattered into pieces. While Chui Lu was stunned, I whispered into her ear, "Since she wants us to turn against each other, let's give her what she wants and see what she does next." She then shouted at the top of her lungs, "Fine. You lowly slut. You're jealous that the lady gave me something." Chui Lu snapped out of her daze, crossed her arms, and retorted, "Nonsense. Who do you think you are? Acting so boldly in front of me?" I noticed that the pouch on Chui Lu's waist seemed to contain a half-finished bracelet, intricately woven. I grabbed it and slipped it onto my wrist. Chui Lu sighed in exasperation, cursing, "You little slut. As long as I'm around, you'll see how you dare to act so boldly." But she couldn't resist my constant teasing and pushing, so she pushed me away and began to braid a bracelet for me. After the argument, a new and elegant bracelet replaced the jade bracelet on my wrist. I was satisfied, casually messing up my hair, and about to leave when I heard the old woman's voice outside the door. "The general is here." Ling Ziyuan had just entered the courtyard when he frowned at the old woman beside him. "Where is the lady?" The old woman lowered her head, her voice soft but clear. The two girls, Huamei and Chui Lu, had an argument. The lady was angry and is not feeling well, so she didn't allow us to tell the general. "Shut up. Don't speak out of turn." Lin Xia was supported by a maid, her face pale as she stepped forward with a smile and explained, "Huamei is a servant in my mother's quarters. She has a delicate temperament. Chui Lu is also a strong-willed girl. They were just arguing a bit. It's my fault for not being able to stop them." Upon hearing this, Ling Ziyuan's expression grew serious. "Have them come see me." Saying this, he embraced Lin Xia and entered the main hall. In my previous life, Chui Lu and I had a real fight. When we were furious, we even tore at each other's clothes and wrestled, leaving our hair and clothes in disarray like madwomen. Our faces were flushed red, and even the most beautiful woman would have lost her charm. So Ling Ziyuan nearly glanced at us with disdain and ordered us to go kneel on the roof tiles. But now, the situation was different. Cui Zhu knelt there straight and tall, her chest proud, her waist slender, and her face as vibrant as blooming peach blossoms. My appearance was more delicate, and Lin Xia was merely average. But in comparison, Ling Ziyuan's astonishment was impossible to hide. His Adam's apple bobbed, and his pupils widened slightly. He stepped forward, lifted Cui Zhu's chin, and slowly stroked it. At the banquet that day, I had too much to drink and didn't get a good look. Now that I see her clearly, this girl isn't bad. Since you're new here, I'll spare you this time. Tonight, you'll make up for it. Cui Zhu remained expressionless, bowing her head in gratitude. Ling Ziyuan embraced Lin Xie. Madam, don't bother with them. The girl is just a toy. Treat it like a cat and dog fighting. I sneered inwardly. Ling Ziyuan's words clearly didn't regard me and Cui Lu as human. But in reality, he was indeed favoring me and Cui Lu. In his previous life, although he had a reputation for cherishing his first wife, once he obtained the beautiful Cui Lu, he indeed pampered her greatly. Watching me and Cui Lu compete for his affection, he seemed to find it amusing. Lin Xie nodded with a smile. But the handkerchief in her hand was clenched so tightly it had lost its shape, and a fierce glint flashed in her eyes. Cui Lu and I left the main hall and went to a secluded spot. Cui Lu took the handkerchief and wiped the spot on her chin where Ling Ziyuan had touched her. She muttered under her breath, "Dirty man." I was taken aback. It turned out that Cui Lu didn't like Ling Ziyuan. No wonder she acted so strangely in my previous life when I took him away from her. She wasn't angry or jealous. I sighed. In this life, I feared I would repeat the same mistake. Cui Lu, if you don't want to serve Ling Ziyuan, then I will. I turned and returned to my room to dress and groom myself. I also gave some silver to Ling Ziyuan's personal attendant, confirmed the time, and waited on the path leading to the main courtyard. As soon as Ling Ziyuan appeared, I held a flower basket and leaned softly against him. As the sun set, petals danced in the air. Ling Ziyuan wrapped his arms around my waist, and as our eyes met, his expression was gentle and intoxicated. Though he was an illiterate warrior, he seemed to enjoy this literary, romantic style. This tactic had always worked on him. But to my surprise, as soon as I fell into Ling Ziyuan's arms, a strong force pulled me out and threw me to the side of the road. It was Cui Lu. I hurriedly tried to get up, but Cui Lu pressed me down, tearing at my clothes. Her voice was low but clear, reaching my ears. "Fool! What are you fighting for? That Lin Xie is no good. Whoever gains her favor will inevitably be targeted by her. She is the mistress, and we are her servants. She has the means to deal with us." My nose grew sore. So she had harbored such thoughts in her previous life, competing with me for favor. Watching me intercept someone, she forced herself to serve Ling Ziyuan, all to secure a path to survival for me. But she didn't know that whether or not she was favored, Lin Xie would never spare us. I mustered all my strength to pin her beneath me, pressing close to her ear. "Let me try. I don't believe the two of us can't fight our way out of this." Cui Lu grabbed my collar and tore at it. "Enough. Let go. A concubine is already lowly. Do you want to be laughed at by that stinking man?" I turned my head to look at Ling Ziyuan, who was excited. Sure enough, he looked like he was watching some interesting trick. Eagerly watching Cui Lu tear at me, a pang of sadness washed over me, and I let go. Cui Lu smoothed her clothes and smiled as she leaned on Ling Ziyuan's arm. The general promised to let me serve him tonight. How could I provoke another little temptress on the way? Ling Ziyuan seemed in a great mood. He laughed heartily, patted Cui Lu's face, and said, "You women, whether noble or lowly, all rely on a man's favor. Seeing how hard you fought, it made me happy. Here's a reward." Before leaving, he turned back to look at me, still lying on the ground in a daze. "Hua Mei, next time you win, I'll reward you too. Ha ha ha." My hands clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms, causing a piercing pain. In the eyes of these high-ranking officials, we slaves and concubines were no different from cats and dogs. When they're in a good mood, they toy with us. When they're not, they dispose of us. In my previous life, Chui Lu miscarried, and I was falsely accused of adultery, all blatant schemes from the harem. But Ling Ziyuan wouldn't speak up for two concubines he'd grown tired of. He only cared about maintaining a harmonious relationship with Lin Xie. Concubines are replaceable, but they seem to have forgotten that even kittens and puppies will bite when cornered. Early the next morning, after Ling Ziyuan left, I went to Chui Lu's room. She was vigorously scrubbing her skin with a loofah, muttering curses under her breath. The room was filled with a faint, almost imperceptible sweet fragrance. I gently took the loofah from her hand and blew a breath on her raw skin. Where did this fragrance come from? In my previous life, I had already suspected that despite Chui Lu's beauty, Ling Ziyuan was not a man of excessive desires. And besides, he had had beautiful concubines to attend to him before marriage. How could he become so obsessed with Chui Lu after just one touch? I had always suspected that the perfume she used was the key, but I had no proof. Chui Lu looked at me in surprise. Your nose is quite sensitive. She leaned lazily against the headboard, took a small packet of spices from under her pillow, and played with it in her hand. This perfume was given to me by my good friend, the 13th concubine, when I left the Zhao mansion. The 13th concubine? Chui Lu smiled. The 13th concubine was originally a courtesan in a brothel, and it was all thanks to this perfume that she was able to be bought by Lord Zhao as a concubine. This perfume is extremely strong and overpowering. Just a tiny bit is enough to make a man never forget the ecstatic sensation. I raised my eyebrows. Are there any taboos? Chui Lu tossed it onto the bed. There are no taboos. But you can't use too much or use it too often. Mix it with other spices. Just a tiny bit each time. Using too much can harm men. I picked up the packet of spices and looked into Chui Lu's eyes. Sister, you must endure for a while longer. Chui Lu grabbed my hand. Hua Mei, what are you doing? I gripped her hand tightly and looked out the window at the opulent general's mansion. For our sisters, we must fight for a life of wealth and honor. In the days that followed, Chui Lu was showered with favor as in her previous life, surrounded by flowers and luxury. Ling Ziyuan, having tasted the sweetness, spent 3 months straight as if he had grown roots in Chui Lu's room. I continued to compete for favor with Chui Lu, but unlike in my previous life, where we had our wins and losses, in this life, Chui Lu consistently held the upper hand. When selecting fabrics for clothes, I deliberately grabbed the most vibrant colors for myself. Lin Xie smiled and urged Chui Lu to yield to me. After a heated argument, I paraded before the general in a vibrant peach red and emerald green gown, my fair face contrasting sharply with Chui Lu's moon-white and jade green attire, making her appear as ethereal as a fairy from the mountains. Lin Xie deliberately arranged for me to accompany the general to bed, but when he arrived, I was arguing and fighting with Chui Lu. When we were separated, my face was lightly scratched by Chui Lu, leaving a shallow wound that bled profusely. On the contrary, Chui Lu's clothes were torn open by me, exposing half of her breasts, and she hid in Ling Ziyuan's arms with infinite charm. The usually feisty and refreshing beauty was rarely so weak, and Ling Ziyuan was in high spirits. I jealous off Chui Lu, so I tripped her while she was working. Chui Lu fell, and Ling Ziyuan punished me to kneel in the courtyard under the midday sun. I got quite sunburned, but Chui Lu was exempted from daily chores and was pampered in the house, becoming even fairer and more delicate. Every day, she would just sit in Lin Xie's room for a while before turning to Chui Lu's room. All kinds of rewards flowed like water. This one-sided situation finally made Lin Xie a little restless. She could indeed wait quietly for the opportunity to deal with us, just like in her previous life. But this kind of special favor made her both envious and jealous. Lin Xie was too greedy. She wanted to be the virtuous matriarch everyone admired while also wanting her husband's adoration and obsession. However, for someone of her plain appearance, this was nearly impossible. In Ling Ziyuan's heart, she was a wife worthy of respect, a woman to be cherished and cared for until the end of their lives. There was tenderness, but never obsession. Chui Lu's courtyard was lit up every night with red candles, and the soft, sensual music echoed without restraint. Chui Lu would come to serve Lin Xia every morning, her body still bearing traces of intimacy. "Madam, please forgive me. I was tired last night and woke up late." Lin Xia looked at Chui Lu's radiant face, clenched her teeth, but still smiled and nodded. "You've worked hard serving the general, there's no need to be so formal." I stood by, helping Lin Xia pin flowers in her hair, lowering my eyes to count the days. Soon, Chui Lu would be diagnosed as pregnant. It was time to reel her in. Late at night, I knelt before Lin Xia and held a small packet of spices above my head. "Madam, I've always suspected that Chui Lu, that little fox, is using her charms to seduce the general. How could someone like him be so infatuated with her and neglect you? There must be something fishy going on. This is what I secretly found in her room. She used this to seduce the general into spending every night with her." I saw her take a small spoonful each time and put it into the incense burner. In the candlelight, Lin Xia stared at the packet of spices, her eyes growing hazy. "Madam? Madam?" After a moment, she snapped back to reality, took the packet of spices, and said, "These are items meant to enhance pleasure, they shouldn't be used in this household. I'll reprimand Chui Lu privately. However, since the general still favors her and it was a gift from Lord Zhao, let's spare her some face." I sighed in relief. I had gambled correctly. She didn't want to use this as an excuse to cause trouble or expose the spices. She was still hesitating. I reached out my hand toward the spices in her hand. My eyes filled with longing. "Madam, why not give these to me? I also want to serve the general." Lin Xia instinctively clutched the spices tighter. "Such things are best avoided. I will destroy them myself. If she doesn't want to give it to me, then she must want to keep it for herself." I exhaled deeply in relief. She had finally succumbed to temptation. Even though she was already the legitimate wife and mistress of the household, she still craved her husband's affection. People are like that, they want everything. And in the end, they lose everything. She would certainly have someone inspect the spices. These were indeed high-quality aphrodisiac spices, and moderate use was harmless and beneficial. However, the dosage of such brothel secret potions could only be mastered by those who had been personally instructed by a brothel woman. Soon, the winds of change swept through the general's mansion. Chui Lu gradually lost her favor, while Lady Lin Xia grew even more affectionate with the general. They were inseparable night after night, calling for water multiple times in a single night, something even newlyweds had never done. Lin Xia's complexion grew visibly more radiant when she went out to attend a banquet. It was only an afternoon's affair, yet Ling Ziyuan personally went to fetch her after court, leading her horse and adjusting the stirrups. Their affection as sweet as honey, the envy of all the high-ranking noblewomen. Unfortunately, just as their love reached its peak, things took a sudden turn. One late night, Huang Laonyang rushed over, calling me and Chui Lu to attend to Lin Xia in her room. We exchanged glances. Ling Ziyuan was with her tonight. Shortly after we entered, we heard shouting, the sound of things being smashed, and the panicked sobs of a woman. Ling Ziyuan, he couldn't do it. Lin Xia was crying on the ground. Ling Ziyuan grabbed Chui Lu and threw her onto the bed, slapping her several times before kicking her off. He then pulled me toward him, but it was no use. In a rage, he kicked me in the stomach. I clutched my stomach, curling up in pain, But my lips curled into a smile in the darkness. Fool! You used too much of that spice. It's damaged the root. You'll never be able to be a man again. Ling Ziyuan's impotent rage echoed throughout the entire general's mansion. As dawn broke, Ling Ziyuan, Lin Xie, Cui Lu, and I were taken to the Songhe courtyard by the old nurse. The commotion last night was so loud that it disturbed Lady Yi, the general's wife, who had been meditating in the courtyard and had no interest in worldly affairs. The main hall of the Songhe courtyard, where no sunlight could penetrate, was filled with the faint scent of sandalwood. Ling Ziyuan followed the doctor into the inner room for treatment, while I, Cui Lu, and Lin Xie knelt on the ground. Lin Xie's body was trembling violently. After a while, the doctor emerged, followed by Ling Ziyuan with a pale face. The doctor bowed. Lady Yi, the general has taken an excessive amount of stimulants, which have damaged his fundamental energy, hence the severe reaction. Yisher's voice was as cold as ice. Dr. Gao, you are renowned as a master physician in the capital and have been a close family friend of the Ling clan for generations. May I ask if my son's condition can be cured? Dr. Gao stroked his beard and shook his head. This medicine is extremely potent and aggressive. The general took too much of it. I am powerless to save him. Yisher's eyelids twitched as she lowered her gaze to examine the women kneeling on the ground. Someone, search their rooms. Don't miss a single corner. I had served Yisher for several years and knew that the angrier she became, the calmer she appeared on the surface. With her only son unable to have children, she must have wanted to kill us all at that moment. Lin Xie's cold sweat dripped from her forehead. Soon, several old maids returned with a package containing only a few remaining spices. Dr. Gao took it, sniffed it carefully, and nodded to Lady Yi. Madam, this was found in the lady's room. These past few days, the lady has indeed been showering her with favor. Lin Xie collapsed completely to the ground. Yisher had never liked this weak and somewhat petty daughter-in-law. She had agreed to the marriage initially because of her brother's position in the Ministry of Revenue. Little did she expect that shortly after the wedding, her brother was exiled for embezzlement. Yisher did not want the general's mansion to be accused of adding insult to injury. So despite her dislike for Lin Xie, she had never caused her any trouble. Little did she know that this would lead to such a tragic outcome for her only son. Lin Xie went mad, crawling on her knees toward Yisher. Mother! It's not true! It's not true! The perfume was for Cui Lu. It was stolen from her room by Huamei and given to me. I'm innocent. She then grabbed Ling Ziyuan's sleeve. General! Believe me! Believe me! Yisher's gaze turned to me, deep and icy. I knelt down and looked at Lin Xie, speaking slowly and clearly. This servant has never given the lady such a thing. Lin Xie froze, then rushed toward me like a madwoman. You bitch! You dared to frame me. It was you who gave it to me. You stole it from Cui Lu's room. That's right. Cui Lu. Everyone in the mansion knows that the general favors Cui Lu. Cui Lu snorted coldly. Old lady. I don't think I'm ugly. It's not surprising that the general found me fresh for a while. It's the lady who's been married to the general for so long. Yet she has neither an outstanding figure nor appearance. Suddenly receiving such favor is what makes people marvel. Ling Ziyuan snatched the perfume from the doctor's hands, sniffed it, then kicked Lin Xie with all his strength. This is the scent. It's strong in your room. You dare to lie. I've treated you well. Yet you dare to harm me. Lin Xie cried and screamed, begging for mercy one moment and cursing me and Cui Zhu the next. Yisher gave a signal, and the old nurse by her side stuffed a cloth into Lin Xie's mouth and tied her up. The lady has suddenly fallen ill. Let's throw her somewhere out of sight to die. Lin Xie was dragged away, and Yisher closed her eyes. You two are no help either. You've turned Yuaner's backyard into a mess and injured his body. You deserve to die. Hua Mei. I thought you were honest. So I let you serve you honor. What a pity. I smiled calmly, feeling no regret. I knew this would be the result. Even the wife of the master of the house had mercy on the concubine, let alone a servant whose life was worthless. Those in power would not bother to distinguish between right and wrong or investigate thoroughly. They would just kill everyone without exception. I nodded and looked at Mrs. Yi. I dare not say anything about the old lady's mercy. But Sister Chui Lu once mentioned to me that her period had not come for a long time and she was afraid she was pregnant. Please check to make sure you don't harm the general's flesh and blood. Mrs. Yi and Ling Yuanfeng's eyes lit up when they heard this. And Dr. Gao hurried forward to take her pulse. General. Lady Yi. It's wonderful news. The Ling family has an heir. Chui Lu looked at me in shock. And I smiled at her. This plot was destined to claim lives. And the child in her womb was her only chance to survive. The sole heir of the Ling family. I embraced Chui Lu and whispered in her ear. Under the stone slab in the southwest corner of your room, I left a letter for you. Follow the instructions in the letter, and you will ensure a lifetime of peace and prosperity. Chui Lu. In my previous life, you risked your life to save me. In this life, I have finally changed your fate. The old woman came to bind me, but Chui Lu clung to me tightly, refusing to let go. The old woman feared hurting her and dared not pull her away forcefully. Ling Ziyuan stood by and pleaded. Chui Lu, what are you doing? In the future, you can have as many servants as you desire. The child in your womb is precious. I will treat you well. Let go. Chui Lu suddenly pulled out the hairpin from her head, the sharp tip pressing against her neck. And fresh blood flowed continuously. General. Lady. If Hua Mei dies, I don't want to live either. Ling Ziyuan was startled and exchanged glances with Yishur, nodding in agreement. In the luxurious bedroom, I took a piece of cotton cloth and wiped the blood from Chui Lu's neck. My nose grew sore, and tears streamed down my face. Why are you doing this? We've always fought so fiercely. Yet now you're suddenly acting like sisters. They'll surely grow suspicious. If I die, you'll be able to carve out a path to wealth and honor. Chui Lu shook her head. I was sold as a child, drifting like a leaf in the wind. Entering the general's mansion wasn't my choice. I thought I'd just get by. But then I met you here. I've done all this so you can live well. If you die, what's the point of me living? I asked the question that had been on my mind for so long. Chui Lu, why are you so kind to me? Chui Lu remained silent, only holding my hand, lifting my sleeve, and gently rubbing the bright red birthmark beneath the thread. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, I was kidnapped by a human trafficker and locked in a dilapidated house with a group of children of various ages. At the time, Chui Lu, who was 9 years old, was also there. She had a high fever, lying alone in the corner, her body burning with heat, constantly calling out for water. The trafficker only brought us a jar of water each day, and we had to fight for it. I was too young to fight for more, so I managed to get just a sip of water. Though I was dying of thirst, I held it in my mouth and fed it to the sick girl. I would occasionally mimic my mother and touch her forehead. The bright red birthmark on my wrist would occasionally flicker before Chui Lu's half-awake eyes. Later, Chui Lu grew increasingly ill. I took advantage of a moment when the water carrier was distracted, bit him, and was beaten for it. But I managed to beg them to take a look at Chui Lu, because Chui Lu was beautiful. The slave trader rewarded me with a potion, and she was resilient. So she recovered. From then on, she kept me by her side and protected me, until we were separated and sold to different families. At the time, I was too young to remember much, and the details of her face are blurry. It was only through Chui Lu's descriptions that I recalled vague fragments. However, Chui Lu remembered everything. After arriving at the general's mansion, she recognized me by my faintly recognizable features and the birthmark on my wrist. She had been protecting me under Lin Xia's care. I threw myself into Chui Lu's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. She had protected me in my childhood, and this foolish girl had remembered it all her life. She had seen through Lin Xia's deceitful nature and had been protecting me in her own way, hoping that Lin Xia would target her instead and spare me. In a previous life, she had even taken a sword blow for me, sacrificing her life. My foolish Chui Lu. Chui Lu and I went to the desolate courtyard where Lin Xia was imprisoned. She was covered in rags, her body reeking of filth, lying on the ground barely clinging to life. No trace of her former noble demeanor remaining. The Yi family had cut off her food and water, giving her only a bowl of water each day, intending to starve her to death there. You worthless slaves. I pulled out a fragrant pastry from my pouch and waved it in front of Lin Xia. Lin Xia immediately forgot her curses, her eyes fixed on the pastry, her sunken cheeks moving constantly. I fed the pastry into Chui Lu's mouth right in front of her. Aunt Chui Lu, eat more. You're pregnant now, one person eating is enough for two. Lin Xia's eyes widened suddenly, her voice changing. Aunt? Pregnant? I nodded. Chui Lu is pregnant with the general's only heir and has been elevated to the status of concubine. And I forgot to tell you. We hit it off immediately. Since the day she entered the mansion, we've been like sisters. Lin Xia's eyes turned bloodshot, and her chest rose and fell uncontrollably. You worthless servant. How dare you lie to me? You never expected it. Did you? To be defeated by a servant you've always mocked. Lady, you can just wait here to die. I supported Chui Lu and turned to leave, but Lin Xia burst into laughter. Ha 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 ha. You two fools. Do you think giving birth to a child will make you the mistress of the general's mansion? The child's birthday will be your death day. Chui Lu reached the door and ordered the old woman guarding her. She's still so strong. There's no need to give her water. 2 days later, Lady Lin of the general's mansion died suddenly. A rolled-up straw mat was thrown into the graveyard. When the news reached Chui Lu, she was embroidering a pair of tiger head shoes. You brought this upon yourself. She sighed again, but she had a point. We're too deeply involved in that matter. Agreeing to let you stay that day was just their way of buying time. Once the child is born, they probably won't spare our lives. By the way, what did you write in the letter you left for me? You won't let me read it. I smiled, peeled a grape, and stuffed it into her mouth. It's a plan. Of course. A secret rumor suddenly began circulating in the capital. General Ling Ziyuan had been drugged by his wife, indulged in excessive lust, and had become impotent. Ling Ziyuan was surrounded by suggestive glances and smiles. Civil officials would deliberately invite him to brothels to relieve his boredom, pushing the most provocative and alluring women into his arms, then laughing hysterically at his terrified reactions. The women, following orders, would deliberately touch his lower body. Ling Ziyuan, enraged and ashamed, kicked one of them so hard she spat blood, further fueling the rumors. The military officers were more direct, shouting at him from a distance in loud voices, "Old Ling, I hear you're no good anymore? Have you become a eunuch? Come with me to enjoy some pleasure and shut those gossiping mouths." Ling Ziyuan could only flee in disgrace. On the streets of the capital, children and beggars sang songs. The great general is a fake eunuch. The real man is a fake man. Chui Lu, with her slightly protruding belly, applied medicine to the blisters on his lips. General, there are too many people in the mansion, and someone must have leaked the news. Why don't you consider leaving the capital for a while to avoid hearing those rumors every day? Once they forget about it, our child will be born, and the rumors will disappear on their own. Ling Ziyuan said. What does a woman know? But his heart was moved. A few days later, bandits rebelled in Yongzhou, and General Ling Ziyuan volunteered to go with them to suppress the rebellion. Watching Ling Ziyuan ride away on his horse, I smiled softly. In my previous life, after I died, my soul lingered and drifted aimlessly. The Yongzhou rebellion was caused by the commander's overconfidence, leading them into the enemy's trap. Not a single soldier survived. In my previous life, Ling Ziyuan didn't go. But in this life, he must go. After all, the rewards he gave to Cui Lu were all given by me to the begging children singing ballads. A month later, the elder had bestowed upon us the cats and dogs from the old lady's courtyard. As juniors, we dared not scold or beat them, let alone a living person. What? Yishir looked at the coffin being carried back, overcome with grief, and collapsed. 3 days later, she too followed him in death. I stuffed a ginger-soaked handkerchief into Cui Lu's hands, took another one for myself, and knelt before the two coffins, weeping. But I felt a bit puzzled. In my previous life, at this time, Lin Xia was pregnant. Yishir, overjoyed, drank a few extra cups of wine, caught a cold from the wind, and fell ill. She died suddenly. The timing matched, but the manner of death did not. It must be because the specific events had changed. A eunuch from the palace came to deliver the imperial edict. In the vast general's mansion, only Cui Lu, with her swollen belly, came to receive it. The emperor, moved by Ling Ziyuan's sacrifice for the country and the loss of 3 members of the general's family, deemed it no small matter. Therefore, he specially issued an edict to confer the title of lady on Cui Lu. If the child in her womb was a girl, she would be rewarded with 1,000 taels of gold. If it was a boy, he would be granted a noble title to ensure the continuation of the Ling family's lineage. Cui Lu and I cried tears of gratitude. We were overjoyed. After the funeral, we moved into the main courtyard of the general's mansion, and everyone addressed Cui Lu as lady. Cui Lu took my hand and adopted me as her younger sister, and everyone in the general's mansion began to call me Miss. In the 2nd month of spring, when the grass was growing and the swallows were flying, Cui Lu went into labor in the middle of the night. She screamed in agony inside, and I knelt outside, pleading to all the gods and Buddhas. Cui Lu was bearing the sin for me. After an unknown amount of time, a loud cry pierced the night sky. It was a healthy boy. Cui Lu looked at him with disdain and refused to hold him, saying, "It's just a stinky boy." I smiled and picked up the infant, pressing his face against hers. Our 3-person family's happy life had finally begun. We had power, wealth, peace, and a lovely child. In this grand mansion with its ornate beams and painted pillars, we would now live out our days with Cui Lu by my side. End of the story.